Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we are taking a look at a one-off, one-of-a-kind, unique Smith Wesson Performance Center version of the Model 3566 pistol. Now, if you recognize that, it's because you know that this is chambered for the 356 TSW cartridge, or 356 Team Smith & Wesson. This is a cartridge that Smith & Wesson developed in the early 1990s to basically take advantage of a developing trend in practical shooting, USPSA and IPSC. So what had happened, and by the way, I have a full video on the development and the commercial production of the 356 TSW cartridge and the 3566 pistol that went along with it. I'll link that video at the end of this one. But the short version is people discovered that 38 Super gave them 2 extra rounds in an otherwise 45 ACP handgun, like a 1911, and that was of benefit. At the same time, people were starting to experiment with compensators, muzzle brakes. And what people found was that higher pressure cartridges were more effective in muzzle brakes because they produced more gas at a high velocity coming out the muzzle of the gun. The muzzle brake works by redirecting that gas upward to push the muzzle of the gun down, and the more energy you have in that gas, the more effective the compensator is. And so hot-loaded, high-pressure cartridges were actually easier to control than lighter-loaded cartridges because, yes, you were getting a bit more recoil, but the straight-back recoil into the hand didn't really matter, and the higher pressure gave you a more effective compensator that kept the muzzle flatter and allowed you to fire follow-up shots faster. This eventually led to people trying to do things like 9mm major, because at the time, because USPSA had major and minor power factors, where if you shot a major, more powerful cartridge, you got more points for the same hits than with a minor factor, power factor cartridge. 9mm Parabellum was essentially the minor cartridge, and 45 ACP was the major. Well, to move back a bit, people started hot-loading 9 Parabellum to major power factor levels, coupling that with a compensator to keep the muzzle climb down, and this kind of worried USPSA management for a couple of reasons. First off, because it was kind of obsoleting their rule system, and secondly, because people were like loading 9 Parabellum to levels that were dangerously above what the rated pressures for these cartridges and their pistols really were. What Smith & Wesson did was essentially take that 9mm major Wildcat cartridge and turn it into a standard production cartridge. They made the case length about 21.5mm long, but they loaded it to the same overall length as 9mm Parabellum, so it would fit in the same magazines, and you could use the same fundamental, the same basic pistols, just built for 356 TSW. The pressure, the SAMI spec pressure on the cartridge was an average pressure of 50,000 psi, so it was a much higher pressure, much higher rated pressure, which means the guns that were designed for it could actually handle that pressure, unlike 9mm pumped up to that kind of velocity. And by the way, velocity-wise, we're talking 147 grain bullet at about 1,220, 1,240 feet per second. You could get a 115 grain bullet going at like 1,600 feet per second. So this is a seriously hot, high performance cartridge. And in order to properly exploit it, the Smith & Wesson Performance Center for the 1994 US Nationals built 6 6-inch barreled, basically really high-end, fancy competition pistols for the Performance Center shooting team to use. And this is the very first of them. There are a whole bunch of changes on this from a standard 3566. It's truly exactly what you would expect from something called the Performance Center, the custom shop of a major firearms company. So first off, it has a 6-inch slide. The standard pattern of 3566s had either a 3.5-inch slide for the compact version or a 5-inch slide for the competition version. In fact, this particular one does come with a 5-inch slide assembly as well. In fact, it's a 5-inch slide assembly in 9mm Parabellum. One of the other benefits of 356 TSW was it was a simple barrel swap, barrel swap and recoil spring swap, to swap to 9 Parabellum from your fancy 356 caliber cartridge. Now, this one was designed to be a limited division gun, which means it didn't have the extra performance features of compensator or muzzle brake, or an optical sight, a red dot sight. Instead, it has good adjustable simple iron sights and a solid muzzle. Now, there is that interesting brass ring inside there, which we'll get to in just a moment. But first, a few of the other features on the outside of the gun. We have, well, the normal 3.56s had a slide-mounted safety and decocker up here. This one is single action only. You can tell because the trigger doesn't go far enough forward to be a double action trigger. And it has a 1911 style big extended paddle thumb safety right there. The grips have been custom textured with what the Performance Center called tree bark. This was their first experiment with this. It kind of looks like it was done by impressing a very small, very hot fork into the plastic. It kind of looks a little ugly, but it actually gives a pretty darn good grippy texture to the grips. We have this plastic extended base plate on the magazine, which is 20 rounds. The standard magazine here for the gun was 15. They did actually make a 12-round version. The short-barreled 3.56s shipped with 12-round magazines, the long-barreled ones with 15-round magazines, and then the Performance Center custom pattern had a 20-round magazine to it. There you go. It's not just a custom base plate, it's a whole extended magazine with a plastic base extension on it. There are no standard Smith & Wesson markings. Instead, we have a Performance Center logo on the right side of this frame. And then on the left side of the frame, we have the serial number, and it's been given a fancy custom serial number of TSW Team Smith & Wesson 0356, 356 being the cartridge designation. The front of the grip strap here and the front of the trigger guard have both been given a nice deep aggressive checkering to give some grip. The trigger is serrated there, and the trigger in this gun is fantastic. So if I have it cocked, the trigger press, very light, very short, single action trigger. And if I then reset the recock the hammer, the trigger reset is whoop, right there. Fired, reset. This is definitely a competition shooter's pistol. It's a great trigger. Our spare slide here is marked Smith & Wesson, but you'll see it doesn't have the safety lever up here because there is the safety on the frame of this particular custom piece. One of the neat things here, if I take out the recoil spring, that brass ring in the front of the slide, what is that? Well, that is your barrel bushing, and it is actually a brass barrel bushing. It is a ring that rotates inside the slide there. So the pistol is a basic Browning-style tilting barrel gun, and what that means is there has to be space for the barrel to pivot inside the front of the muzzle, and typically what that means is that your barrel bushing has some play in it. Well, play in parts is not a good thing, not conducive to maximum accuracy in a serious competition pistol. And so the way that they fixed that here was to actually put this rotating brass bushing in as the barrel bushing. So this sits snug around the barrel, and when the barrel tilts, the whole bushing can actually rotate in this rounded surface inside the front of the muzzle. That is an expensive sort of modification, and something that's something you only find in really high-end fancy pistols. So it's actually a really snug fit. There we go. And so when this tilts, there is no actual movement between the barrel and the barrel bushing. The barrel bushing rotates snugly inside the front end of the slide. Very, very cool. Now, if you're not familiar with 356 TSW and you listen to this whole video, you may be wondering where you can pick up this cartridge that's so great. Well, you can't because the cartridge died almost as quickly as it was born. Well, there have been a couple attempts to rejuvenate it, and they've all pretty much fell flat on their face. What happened in 1994 was other shooters at the Nationals complained about the unfair advantage of this pistol designed essentially designed to break the spirit of the rules while following all of the letter of the rules. The Performance Center shooting team scores were scrapped from the match, and the governing agency of USPSA got together fairly quickly and changed the rules so that you could not meet major, a cartridge wouldn't be considered major unless it both met the power factor requirements and had a minimum bore diameter of 0.400 inches. Previous to that, it had been 0.354, which allowed 9mm and simply prohibited you from doing something like a really high velocity 32. So with that change in rules, all of a sudden everything that Smith & Wesson has done to get this allowable as a standard, as a limited production handgun, limited being the USPSA division, they had to make it available on the commercial market, which they did. The Performance Center made 3.5-inch versions for carry and 5-inch versions for competition. They had to get 3 different manufacturers to produce the ammunition commercially, which they did. They went through all these hoops only to find that when the pistol, in fact, performed extremely well, they were sabotaged by having the rules changed on them at that point. And at that point, the cartridge essentially just died. It is fundamentally a very good cartridge that does its job very well, but its main market, its main use was in competition. Could it have expanded from there into tactical use, into military, into law enforcement? Well, probably not military, but into law enforcement use, somewhat like the 10mm, the 40 Smith & Wesson? Potentially. Certainly there could be good arguments for it, but they all come to naught because it doesn't have that base competition use that makes it commercially viable because of the rule changes. Anyway, this is an absolutely magnificent pistol. I really can't get across on camera just how excellent the trigger is, how smooth the operation is. It's a beautiful piece of Performance Center handcrafted work. Very cool to get a chance to take a look at. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.